Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. I'm Randy Wright, and I'll be your captain on this solo flight special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. Folks, this will be the final boarding call, so if you please, claim your seats, fasten your seatbelts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show while I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, because there really is a lot of news and information to get to before I may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, folks, things just seem to keep getting worse for Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus and his shadowy past. If there's one thing that has been a common denominator with respect to the Donaldus, it's that his followers are basically willing to forgive him for any of his past misdeeds. They try to characterize anyone who attacks him as being a liar, just like their great leader. But the problem with that case and with that type of argument is that the facts speak clearly for themselves. In today's solo flight, I am going to be focusing particularly on a point that Donaldus has been attempting to skirt away from. Nevertheless, the facts are there, as clear as day, to be seen by anyone and everyone involved with the case, and that is his Polish connection. The so-called Polish brigade that was hired to help demolish the building that stood where Trump Towers stands today and then construct Trump Towers itself. This story goes all the way back to the 1980s when Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus basically personified and represented the epitome of all that was corrupt and brash of the 1980s. He had hired a contractor whose normal line of work was that of window washing and not demolition and construction to basically procure the cheapest sort of labor that he could find in order to put the tower up. And he had also gone through a litany of false promises, planning to secure the historic aspects of the building that stood on the site at the time. And that building was an Art Deco style with many friezes on the side of the building, which were iconic and considered a part of New York's landmarks. So he made all of these verbose and grandiose promises, which he failed to keep. Now, folks, the reason I find this so interesting is that he's made another litany of grandiose and verbose promises, but if history is any indicator as to how Donaldus will act in the future, it will be that he shall fail to keep or live up to any of these great promises that he has made, thereby leaving his followers out in the cold. But for some reason, they just seem completely incapable of connecting the dots here. They don't want to see reality, and they feverishly attack anyone who would say anything against their great messianic figure. But back to the Polish Brigade. The reason this is so tantalizing and potentially damaging or harmful to the Donald is the fact that his entire campaign for the 2016 election cycle has been based off of this anger that's brewing in the hearts and minds of the American citizenry over the torrent of illegal aliens that have been flooding across our porous southern border. He has claimed that he would be the one and only candidate who could bring an abrupt, swift, complete, and total end to the problem of illegal aliens that has plagued this country for well over half a century now. So, back in the 1980s, Trump was looking to create a new tower. This tower was supposed to reflect his ego. It was to be a symbol for the rest of the world to see just how successful Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus actually was. He had put everything into it, and it was absolutely an ego trip. That is the only way to describe what he was setting out to do with the construction of that tower. And part of his art of the deal was to say, we need to come up with the cheapest way to go about constructing this. That in and of itself is not a problem. However, it becomes a problem when he does it in such a way as to dehumanize his employees, to work around well-established New York health and safety codes and building codes that were implemented to protect not only his employees, but the public at large. So again, we see that he had hired a subcontractor who was rather shady, to say the least, to secure the subcontractors who would go about the demolition of the existing building on the site and the eventual construction of Trump Tower itself. Now, already a bunch of Trumpus's followers, the Trumpeteers, have come forth and said that Donaldus had no connection with the hiring of the Polish workers. Now, what's so incredible about that to me is that there can be no question, by the current legal standards that exist, that he was responsible for the employment and procurement of the illegal alien Polish workers who were absolutely a quintessential part of the demolition and building process for Trump Tower. Now, before anyone starts jumping on me and saying that modern legal standards don't apply, I'm speaking to a legal standard that has been with us since the turn of the 20th century. There's the notion of vicarious liability. Now, folks, bear with me because I am going to have to delve into a little bit of legal technicality and legalese here in order to explain what is going on with the Trump Tower case. This whole notion of vicarious liability means that an employer can be liable for the misconduct or negligence or skirting of the law by his agents, those who work under his control and authority, if certain conditions are met. Now, the general rule is that vicarious liability does not apply to independent contractors, yet there are always exceptions to the general rules in law. And with the case of vicarious liability that goes under the legal term of respondeat superior, meaning that the master is liable for the acts of a servant, the courts have a long-held tradition of applying a set of standards to determine whether vicarious liability is applicable. So, what are the cases? Well, if it's a property owner, there we have it. Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus is the property owner. After all, he makes no bones about the fact that he is a New York billionaire businessman and real estate tycoon. Secondly, if the property owner is engaging the independent contractors in work that is inherently dangerous, there is a non-delegable duty. So, we know by Donald Trump's own admission from a piece in The Beast, which actually went back and looked at the transcripts of the testimony involved in the Polish workers' case, in which he said he couldn't have spoken to the Polish workers as they had contended because they had stated that they approached the Donald directly in order to demand payment for wages that had not been paid. And he said that there was no way that he could have spoken to them because he doesn't venture inside buildings that are being demolished because it's very dangerous, and that you would have to be a very brave soul to do that, and he just wasn't sure as to whether he was that brave or not. So you see, by his own admission, it was inherently dangerous. Then the courts determine whether or not he would have been in control of the workers. That means, did he have any say in whether they were hired or not? He did, because he went to the contractor who then hired the subcontractors. Was this in the regular course of his business? Well, again, being a real estate mogul and tycoon, absolutely. He had built and demolished buildings all throughout the country. Therefore, he was certainly in the regular business of constructing and demolishing buildings. Therefore, that element of vicarious liability is satisfied. Then it's whether he had the ability to fire them. Well, yes. There's also the question of whether he would have any impetus or input into the wages that were paid to the workers. Well, the workers had not been paid. Donaldus controlled the pay. There is no way around that. That, too, fits the type of case where this notion of vicarious liability absolutely applies. Now, where it gets a bit tricky is, did he supply the equipment for the demolition? We're not sure. But certainly he probably did, when you take into the account, and I'm using a legal doctrine here known as res ipsa loquitur, or the thing speaks for itself. This is where, if you don't have any direct evidence, you can still point to it being the case based on the great weight of the evidence that exists within the case itself. The contractor, which he had procured to hire the subcontractors, had no history or work experience with demolition and construction. His trade was in window washing, which is a far cry from demolition and construction. And therefore, if he had no experience with that, someone had to supply the tools. And that begs the question of whether the person who was doing the hiring on behalf of the principal being Donaldus Caesar Trumpus, had his own business. Clearly, he did for window washing, but not for demolition and construction. This would have been set up through one of Trumpus's front companies. So you see, all of the webs here is starting to connect. All of the little independent factors are coming together to show that there is this doctrine of respondeat superior, or vicarious liability, which is absolutely applicable to Donald J. Trump in the case of the demolition and construction for the site where Trump Towers stands today. And the other part of it is that he had violated New York health and safety codes as well as building codes, in that he hadn't secured the turning off of electricity at the site. So these Polish workers, who were illegal aliens, were stripping live or hot wires with their bare hands, which goes against all of the safety codes, because that is not only a risk of electrocution for the workers on the site, but it presents a fire hazard and risk which would have put the public at large in great jeopardy and danger. You see, this is the alarming pattern that we see arise time and again with respect to Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus. He absolutely believes that laws do not apply to him. Like the person that he was the greatest donor to, Hillary Rotten Clinton, he somehow thinks that he is above the law. And you know, folks, that goes against every tenet, natural law application of this great representative republic of ours. The old adage goes that the United States of America is a nation of laws, not of men. Therefore, this whole idea of equal protection under the law absolutely comes to the surface, and absolutely is a point of contention that really is put forward with respect to Donaldus. He is the very type of corrupt enabler that has enraged the American electorate. Yet, through his crafty lies, he has convinced his followers that come hell or high water, there is no way that he is a political insider. And that also speaks to the nefarious sort of thing that he tries to pull with Texas Senator Ted Cruz, trying to say that he is an establishment hack. Why? Because he's a politician. Well, stop and think about it for a moment, folks. We have a political system here in the United States. a political system that is based on the supreme law of the land. And as my first officer, Jeremy Grapington, and I have reiterated time and again on past episodes of the Wright Flyer, the supreme law of the land, pursuant to Article 6, Clause 2 of our shared United States Constitution, is the Constitution itself. This is a fact that we cannot get around. It is the absolute truth, and it is applicable in all cases. So if Donald Trump is incapable of following the laws, then he's not going to follow the Constitution. And in a political system, you want someone who has a track record of standing up for the Constitution and defending the fundamental and unalienable rights of the ultimate wielders of sovereignty, who are, without a shadow of a doubt, the American people, to be qualified. It takes the constitutional framework to allow the country to return to the sort of direction that enables the true wielders of sovereignty to take the steps that are necessary to return America to prominence and prosperity. But you see, folks, with Trump, he claims he's not a politician, but he is a politician. He's a politician because he's been lining the palms of corrupt New York politicians for generations. And before anyone says that this is merely just the cost of doing business in a hostile environment, such as that of the rotten Big Apple of New York City, this goes beyond that. This is far and beyond just merely doing business. This is putting the lives of his employees at great and significant risk of danger and harm. You know, we have these laws, and New York State and New York City were both legally obliged and authorized to create these health and safety and building codes for the safety of their people. This is part of the tenets of federalism, which form the very foundation and bedrock of this great representative republic of ours. But you see, Donald ignores that. Donald thinks that he can go out and do whatever he wants because he is the great Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus. But nothing could be further from the truth. Donald is just as culpable under the law as any and every one of us. And to say that he doesn't have any culpability or liability to the Polish illegal aliens that he hired is poppycock. It's a bunch of hogwash. It's malarkey. Folks, there is no way around the fact that he was directly involved with this process. And then he lied to the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media when he said that he didn't know about it. He had to have known that the guy that he hired was only a window washer. There already, he has stated that it's somebody who was not normally in the line of business of demolition and construction, although he himself is doing that as a regular part of his business operations. Then he even went on to admit on the stand, according to this Beast article, that, all right, he probably did know about it late into the demolition process. You see, he's trying to bring up this notion of plausible deniability. However, the law has an answer for that. That, of course, is the notion of respondeat superior or vicarious liability. Donald J. Trump is liable. There is no way around that. And he knew he was liable. That is why he got one of his minions to go after the attorney who was representing the so-called Polish brigade and told him that if he did not back off the case or stop causing trouble, that Donaldus would bring forth a lawsuit against the attorney seeking $100 million in damages. You see, folks, what this is? This is, without a doubt, an attempt to use the legal system as a form of intimidation and blackmailing. He's attempting to deny the Polish workers their day in court. Now, already I can hear the shrill voice of the trumpeters in the back of my mind, squeaking in their disharmonious, discordintal choir, saying, "But Randy, how can you know this or that?" Well, here's the deal. They had Trump had availed himself of New York law by operating within the jurisdiction of New York State and the city of New York. He had chosen to blatantly disregard and violate the health and safety codes, and he had allowed the workers to work on the site. Therefore, any claims that they could not have the law apply to them just goes out the window because of the way that jurisdiction in the United States works. It's been that way since the inception of this great representative republic of ours. But you see, these sorts of facts don't seem to matter a lick to the trumpeters. They believe that their great messianic leader can do no wrong. Well, you see, folks, when you have that sort of cult of personality, you are treading in very dangerous waters, because that is the sort of twisted mindset that leads to totalitarian dictators. And folks, I will get into this aspect of the story a little bit later on in the show, because there are some real jewels and gems there to delve into. But we see that Trump understood that he was vicariously liable, and that is why he went through the trouble of sending a minion in order to intimidate the council for the so-called Polish Brigade. Now, folks, this is the type of corruption, what is known as crony capitalism, that drives the American people wild. And you know what? I can't blame the American people for being upset with this, but we have to open our eyes to facts and reality. And you see, that's what Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus is a master at. Denying reality, attempting to obfuscate the truth in order to seek personal gain. That has been his modus operandi for over 3 decades. But we here at the Wright Flyer are completely dedicated to bringing you the truth, and that is why I am focusing on this story. It is something that cannot nor should not be swept under the rug. So let's delve a little bit deeper into what all this means. It means that Donald Trump is a hypocrite of the worst sort. He bases his campaign on something that he doesn't actually believe in, something that he doesn't actually advocate other than to the people. And then he's already shown signs that he's going to back down from what he's doing. You know, he says he's going to put a swift and immediate end to the illegal alien problem that is festering within the United States of America currently. But he also says that he's going to allow the illegal aliens that have been forced to go back to come in through an expedited process if they're the right sort of people. Well, this is problematic in 2 ways. First of all, it's creating a protected class, which is a direct violation of the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. It's also problematic in that the existing immigration laws on the books state that if you have been deported from the country, re-entry into the country is a felony, which means you cannot legally re-enter the country. And, as we all know, pursuant to Article 1, Section 8 of our shared Constitution, only Congress is enumerated with the power to create immigration and naturalization laws, not the president. That is the same problem that we have with Barack Hussein Obama, who has attempted to abuse his executive order powers in order to create carpet or blanket amnesty for those who have entered the United States of America illegally, for those who chose not to enter under the auspices of our well-established and existing laws. So, again, as Jeremy and I have said since our first episode, which aired on September 11th, 2015, we say that the answer and the key to all of the problems that currently plague the United States of America have been with us since the beginning. And those laws And those keys are none other than our shared United States Constitution. So there you have it, folks. It is found within our foundational documents. And to go against that is to create the sorts of problems that currently plague the United States of America. But Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus doesn't care about this. It doesn't cross his mind. It's not something that he holds near or dear. And he care. He is in this for himself. He has his own ideas, his own twisted ideology, and his own machinations for what he thinks is best. But stop and pause for a moment and think about this, folks. It's not that he's doing this for the better interest of the country. He's doing this for himself. He's attempting to consolidate power within himself. Every proposed and proffered solution by Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus circulates and absolutely swirls around this persona of I, me. It's not we the people, as our founding fathers intended it to be. He's not going off the notion that the American people are the absolute and ultimate wielders of sovereignty in this great representative republic of ours. And folks, there can be no question about that is a dangerous precedent to set. And we shouldn't just allow this man to get away with whatever he wants. That goes against the grain and fiber of the foundational image that our founding fathers had for this country. And if we recall that our entire representative republican form of government is absolutely based on natural law tenets that are timeless, that is something that Donaldus simply cannot do. Our fundamental and unalienable rights have been endowed to us by our Creator. Therefore, no legitimate earthly authority can take those rights away without due process under the law. But you see, we've already got a disconnect with the New York billionaire, businessman, and real estate tycoon and mogul. He does not believe that the laws apply to him. He simply believes that he is above the law, that he is somehow superior to the rest of us. Is that not the type of cronyism and nepotism that we have seen within both the detente wing of the gutless opposition party, or GOP, and the DNC? Is that not what the people are so angry about? This is what marks the worst characteristics about the so-called establishment of both parties. This is why you see Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus and Lloyd Face, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders trying to vie for a position. Now, what's interesting to note about that is that Donaldus is currently the front runner in the gutless opposition party, whereas nerd-faced Bernie Sanders has absolutely been marginalized by the Democratic political machine. Irrespective of this, there are serious consequences for allowing someone like Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus to become the nominee of the gutless opposition party. He is a caricature of everything that the left says is wrong with the right-wing philosophy in the United States of America today. Think of the caricature they paint. They claim we're all a bunch of racists that don't care about the little guy and the employees, that we are just greedy and couldn't care less about the well-being of the entire nation. You notice something here, folks? Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus fits all of this. But what is truly intellectually disingenuous about all of this is the fact that Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus does not actually represent right-wing philosophy. For the vast majority of his adult life, he has been a progressive. That means he has espoused the ideology and embraced the ideology of the Fabian socialists. And remember, folks, the Fabians are the ones who are hell-bent on destroying this great representative republic of ours. These are the sorts of things that we cannot pull our attention away from. We cannot ignore this. And if we allow him to become the nominee for this 2016 presidential election, it will irreparably harm the conservative image for generations to come. Now, when the country is in the midst of an identity crisis, as it currently is, that is something we can ill afford, especially when our shared constitution is on the line. The very identity, sanctity, and spirit of our representative republic are in grave jeopardy. And it will only be worsened by turning the reins of power over to a narcissist and elitist like Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus. It would be a disaster, folks. Mark my words. It would be an utter disaster. So what does this mean with respect to Donaldus and his followers? Because there can be no question that what Donaldus's followers are doing here is enabling the great New York businessman, billionaire, and real estate tycoon to get away with just about anything. In fact, Donaldus Trumpus himself even went before the cameras of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media and said that if he shot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue in broad daylight, that he wouldn't lose a single voter. And his followers seem to be showing that. It's as though they have thrown and cast reason aside, that they don't care about what he is because they're driven by this blind passion and rage. Now, as I've said that in the past, anger can be justified, but it needs to be righteous indignation. And yes, there absolutely is righteous indignation on the part of the ultimate wielders of sovereignty of this country. The problem is that Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus is misleading them. He's manipulating them. Raw emotionalism leaves one exposed to be easily manipulated. That is something we can ill afford in this great representative republic of ours, particularly when you remember and recall that we, the people of the United States of America, are, point in fact, the ultimate wielders of sovereignty in this great republic. So, we see that little orphan Annie Toto Coulter is once again misconstruing in an intellectually disingenuous fashion one of the attacks that Narco Rubio launched against the Donaldus. Remember, it was Narco Rube E-I-E-I-O that started hitting Trumpus on his hiring of illegal aliens in the demolition and construction for Trumpus Towers. Now, the way that little orphan Annie attempted to set this up was, yep, 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 yep. Oh, look, Rubio is anti-white. Yep, 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 yep. Because, yep, yep, he doesn't like Polish people. Yep, 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 yep. The Polish people have high IQs. Yep, 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 yep. Shut up, and you've lost any and all credibility. Why don't you go join ranks with Donaldus's other esteemed followers, those who have endorsed him, including former Ku Klux Klan Grand Wizard David Duke? Because what you're saying there is completely irrelevant. It doesn't matter whether Polish people have high IQs or not. What matters in the case at bar, which you should understand, being an attorney, little orphan Annie, is whether Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus is liable for the illegal hiring of these Polish so-called immigrants, but they're not immigrants, they're aliens, and whether or not he violated New York health and safety codes and failed to pay them. Under respondeat superior, as I mentioned in the first segment of this program, he absolutely is. That's why he went out of his way in an attempt to intimidate the Polish Brigade's attorneys. Annie, you're the one that sits there and says they have high IQs. Don't you think that it's wrong for Donaldus to rip off those Polish workers? Or does your compassion only apply selectively, like your logic, if you even have logic? You see, this is the problem, folks. We have charlatans and snake oil salesmen and women who are attempting to paint Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus as some sort of messianic figure when in fact nothing could be further from the truth. He does not represent the American character, heritage, spirit, and identity. He is hell-bent on merely amassing as much wealth and power for himself. That is what has always motivated him. But you see, Ann Coulter is attempting to lie. She always attempts to lie. It's as though she doesn't even recall how to tell the truth. Well, Anne, enjoy your march into irrelevance and obscurity. Because, mark my words, if Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus actually becomes the nominee of the gutless opposition party, it will be the death of conservatism for generations to come. And we, especially in times as dire as these, could ill afford that. You're doing America a great disservice, Anne. Get over yourself. I know you think, like your master, that you are somehow the greatest thing since sliced bread. But your actions have shown that nothing could be further from the truth. You see, folks, what we have to focus on here is what matters. What matters is the Constitution. And one would think that little orphan Annie would understand this, having gone through legal education. Maybe she needs to get a refund, and she definitely needs to go and have some remedial reading with respect to the Constitution. Folks, I'm going to repeat it again. The only lens that matters, and the only litmus test to be applied in determining whether or not a candidate is qualified to be commander-in-chief, to wield the reins of political power in this great representative republic of ours, is none other than our shared Constitution. And Ann Coulter and Sarah Palin and Ted Nugent and all of these other supposed conservatives who have circled their wagons around the Donaldus have failed to notice that he never mentions the Constitution. They themselves never mention the Constitution. Now, they bask in it for certain things. For those that believe in the Second Amendment, they're going to claim the Second Amendment. But Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus has a very checkered past with respect to the Second Amendment, just like he has a very checkered past when it comes to adhering to the laws. And that includes the supreme law of the land, our shared Constitution. You know, folks, I'm not just pulling this out of thin air. I've done the research. I've done the digging. I have applied the legal analysis to it. And I have shown you how he violated New York law and how he absolutely was using illegal alien labor to benefit himself. Why now would he make it difficult for his own company to continue to engage in such charades? You know, folks, that just goes against any and all logic. But that's the thing, folks. With respect to Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus and his followers, logic has no place. They don't even consider logic important. It's all about raw emotionalism and manipulation and chicanery. That is what this entire 2016 presidential election cycle has been all about. And we see it each and every time that either Donaldus himself or one of his little Trump humpers opens their mouths. That's what we get. Now, I'm not out to just disparage the Trump voters. I'm trying to reach out and get you to see some logic, to see some reality, to see the danger of your candidate. Because let's face it, folks, Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus, who has switched political affiliations a minimum of 5 times since 1992, is not some paragon of conservative values. He couldn't even properly define conservatism during one of the gutless opposition party presidential candidate debates. That should send up red flags for any decent, hardworking, red-blooded American citizen. Now, folks, I'm not doing this as a form of fear-mongering. Rather, I am attempting to shed the light of truth on this entire spectacle and situation. But it is going to require that you open your eyes to it. Perhaps it is a fool's errand to try and convince the Trumpsters that their leader is not who he claims to be. Perhaps they are just going to continue to suffer from the ostrich syndrome of sticking their heads in the sand and denying that reality and facts even exist. I mean, Ann Coulter is the perfect personification of this symptom that seems to plague each and every one of Trump's ardent supporters. But in this time of dire need, when our entire representative Republican form of government is teetering on the brink of destruction, it is as though Julius Caesar is attempting to cross the Rubicon, to cast the die, and to say that he will take destiny into his own hands and reshape the destiny of Rome. Well, those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past. And that is the last thing that I want to see befall this great country of which I love. And I know that the vast majority of the American population loves and adores this country as well. That's why I call out to each and every one of you, apply the constitutional lens to your respective candidates. I cannot, nor will I, nor do I desire to tell you how to vote. It is not my place to tell someone how to exercise their fundamental and unalienable rights, just as they have no place to tell me how to exercise mine. But I will make a case for why I think a candidate is or is not qualified based on the Constitution itself and based on his or her past conduct. With respect to Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpets, there can be no question that he has gone out of his way to shirk the law, that he has gone out of his way to hoodwink people, and that he is nothing short of a con man. Do we really want to put a con man in the highest office in the land? Would that really be the type of message that we want to send not only to our people, but to the world? I don't think so. And you know, folks, there has to come a time when truth will shine through. Let's just hope that it's not too late for this great republic of ours. Let's hope that we have not failed our founding fathers, that we have, through our complacency and through our bitterness, allowed a charlatan to strip and deprive us of our fundamental and unalienable rights, that we have allowed a true circus ringleader to bedazzle us to the point that we allow our freedoms and liberties and our great legal system to implode. Because if we put Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus in as our nominee, he will not be able to defeat Hillary Rotten Clinton. Why? Because it will be a contest between a criminal and a charlatan who is the criminal's enabler by being her top donor as senator from the state of New York. These are the facts, folks. They are clear as day. They are there in front of us, and there is no way to get around them. But the trumpeteers are completely oblivious to the truth. But I think that it goes to a much greater problem, something that speaks much more deeply about their character or lack thereof. I think they're willfully blind. They don't want to hear the truth. They just want to hear what they want to hear because they're so distraught and frustrated with the direction that the country is currently headed. Now, I don't blame them for being distraught and frustrated, but temper your emotions with logic. Step back and divorce yourself from the situation long enough to be the virtuous public and people that our founding fathers demanded that we be. That is the only way that we, the people, The ultimate wielders of sovereignty are going to be able to turn this country around. That duty, that obligation, and that responsibility falls squarely on our shoulders. It does not belong to anyone else. And no singular candidate, not Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus, not Narco Rube EIEIO, no, not even Ted Cruz himself, can do that. But what we need with a leader is a leader that inherently understands that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. A leader that will vow to remove the chains and shackles of governmental tyranny and bondage, thereby allowing the ultimate wielders of sovereignty to take their rightful place and to enact and enable them to take the prerequisite steps of saving this country. Now, folks, think about that. What is more empowering? Having a charlatan say, me, I'm the only one that can save this country? Or to say, you, the American people, the standard bearers of sovereignty in these United States, are the ones that will ultimately save this country, because that is the way our founding fathers designed this country. I'm going to tell you right now, I think that the more empowering message is the one that enables the American people to act for themselves, to have the free will that is necessary to save their country. I don't want to be led. That's not what our system is about. We are the leaders. The wielders of political power in this country are absolutely supposed to be our servants. They are answerable to we the people, because when you look at the natural law tenets that underpin our federalist system of government, this great representative republic of ours, it absolutely states that power rests with the people, and the people delegate certain amounts of power and authority to the government to enact in their best interests. You see, the Constitution is a great social compact or contract between the wielders of sovereignty and their government. And when the government is in breach of that contract, it is the duty, obligation, and responsibility of the American people to come together and resolve the problem. You see, you have far greater power than you may realize. We have been duped by the Fabian socialists and their twisted machinations, and the historical revisionists that have perverted the true history of our great nation. This is something that can be corrected, but it requires that the people be proactive. Now, Zygmunt Dobbs, that great author and intellectual of the 20th century, wrote in his magnus opus of Keynes at Harvard that the Fabians innately understand that the average American citizen is going to be far too caught up in his or her daily lives to be able to have the political capital or energy to expend or expend on the issue, and therefore it's nigh impossible for them to address the problems and to stay abreast with what the vague and ambiguous terminology of the Fabians are. What's even more dangerous, though, are those who claim to be conservatives, who are dancing to the tune of the Pied Piper of disillusioned conservatives. I'm speaking particularly of Ann Coulter, of Sarah Palin, of Ted Nugent, and of former Arizona Governor Jan Brewer. You all have betrayed your constituents, your followers, your audience. You have misled them. You are charlatans yourselves. Well, it is time for sanity to return to this country. It is time for us to embrace the stark realities that face us as a nation and as a people. We can no longer play these childish games. We can no longer allow those who are hell-bent on destroying our country to have their way with the country. Now, Already I can hear the shrill voice of the trumpeteers in the back of my mind once again saying, "But Randy, how can you tell that Donaldus Trumpus wouldn't stand up for us?" Folks, all you have to do is listen to the very words the man has spoken. Listen to the words that spew from his lips. He says that he is a great negotiator, that he does perfect deals, and he has a good relationship with Nasty Pelosi. That's why he donated money to her. That's why he has a good relationship with Dingy Harry Reid. That's why he, donated to him. And Harry Reid let him engage in Tammany Hall style politics in the Silver States caucuses. So it all good. You don't deal or negotiate with the fundamental and unalienable rights of the people. Our Constitution is non-negotiable. That's right, folks. It is non-negotiable. Our rights are non-delegable and non-negotiable. They are endowed to us by the God of nature, meaning that only through due process can those rights be taken away. But you see, Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus, by his own admission, is a deal maker. He would put our sacred rights up for negotiation. He would blatantly violate the trust that exists between the government and the people. Why? Because he absolutely believes that he is superior to the people. You see, folks, he is condescending to you all the time. Just recall his victory speech at the Silver State caucuses. "I love the uneducated." You know who else said that? Benito Mussolini, the first fascist dictator to rise to power in Italy in the 1920s. And as I promised, we will be getting into that a little bit deeper in the next segment. I know I'm throwing out a teaser there, but it's all in good fun, folks. If we don't have a little bit of fun on the program, I think we'd all go insane, much like the trumpeteers. But when you look at the platform that Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus has built for himself, it does not coincide or line up with our shared Constitution. And the reason I can say that is, take for instance, his position on single-party payer health insurance. That's government-run health insurance, folks. He's even come out and said, "I like the mandate. We just can't have people dying on the streets." And I know that's an un-Republican thing for me to say, but I'm not really a Republican. But maybe I am a Republican. I just don't know. I have a good hair. I built a tower, and everybody loves my tower. It's huge. It's a huge tower. Who cares? Who cares about your tower? Who cares about your business dealings? Let's go off the Constitution, because that is the only litmus test that matters. That is the only method by which we determine whether or not a candidate is clearly qualified to be our next commander-in-chief. The Founding Fathers supported a free market system. A mandate violates that free market system. A single-party payer system violates the free market. It is allowing the government to control one of the most interpersonal parts of our lives. It's not about healthcare, folks. It's about control and dominance. And that is something that Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus absolutely pines for. He sees himself as this next dictator. That's why I call him Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus. Remember that Julius Caesar proclaimed to the Roman people that he would be the savior of the Roman Republic. Then he went out of his way to dismantle it and became the first emperor of Rome. I do not want to see our representative Republican form of government become an empire. The United States of America is a representative republic. It is not an empire. We do not elect emperors. We will not maintain an emperor, and we must stand up for our fundamental and unalienable rights. To do otherwise would be to let not only our founding fathers down, but to let down the up-and-coming generations and those generations that have yet to be born. Is that something we really want to do? Is that really how much this nation has fallen? I have faith that no, the United States of America has not fallen that much. But we are on the brink of falling that much. If we are not careful, we will allow our country to crumble in such a fashion. And we can ill afford to do that when our very sovereignty and identity are under direct threat. Folks, this election cycle is perhaps the most important one in living memory. It is the one in which we determine whether we remain as a representative republic or whether we just destroy the longest contiguous running constitutional document in all of world history. Let us not be the generation that screwed it up. Let us not be the generation that handed over this greatest country of liberty to the rubbish heap of history. Because our country is great. You know, that's why I disagree with the platitude that Donaldus Trumpus stole from Ronald Reagan, make America great again. No, America never stopped being great, and we need to stop following that flawed line of reasoning. America is great. The government is not great. The government is what is hampering and impeding the American people, and it is well past time that we, the ultimate wielders of sovereignty in this great republic, do our part, do our duty to save this country and to bring it back from the brink of ruin. But that means that we have to be proactive, because with every fundamental and unalienable right that has been endowed to us by our Creator attaches the duty and obligation of responsibility. And the responsibility that each and every one of us has is to proactively maintain and safeguard said unalienable and fundamental rights. That is what our founding fathers expected us to do. That is what the natural law expects of us. That is something that we should innately and inherently understand. Do not let the charlatans, the hoodwinks, the snake oil salesmen draw the wool over your eyes. It is time that we stand up for what is good, right, and just about this country and not allow the Fabian socialists to work their poison into the country. And you see, that's part of the problem with Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus. For 30 plus years, no, even longer than that, let's say for about 60 years of his life, since he's almost 70, he has purposefully embraced progressive ideology. But progressivism is diametrically opposed to our Constitution. And because our Constitution is the supreme law of the land, it is therefore violative of the supreme law of the land. Again, folks, these are the stark and staggering realities we cannot escape. But it requires that we open our eyes, and it requires that we be intellectually honest about what is happening. That is why, again, I reach out to the Trump supporters and say, please, at least evaluate him. Do it for the country and use the Constitution. Discard your emotions for a moment. Meditate on this. Think about this. Does he line up with the Constitution? Has he been consistent in his positions, or is he now consistently inconsistent? I want you to really think about that, because that is what is truly alarming about him. And folks, that is absolutely why Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus will not be able to defeat Hillary Clinton. He won't be able to. She'll be able to point to all of his past foibles, and that will cause people to turn off their mental faculties, and all of those so-called and supposed Democrats that were just going to cross the line and vote for Trump, it'll stop them dead in their track. You know why? Because it won't be politically correct to do so. And make no mistake about it, folks, the Democrats are really the party that have embraced the cancerous and poisonous doctrine of political correctness. And when you see that somebody like David Duke has unofficially endorsed Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus, but has told his followers, his being David Duke's followers, to go run out and support Donaldus Trumpus's campaign, that is absolutely going to be the death knell of conservatism. It will make it nigh impossible for us to overcome any of their negative ads, any of their negative attributes that they fling at us, this two-dimensional caricature that they try to pigeonhole us with, because Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus epitomizes everything that they have said are the dark and twisted characteristics and machinations of right-wing philosophy in the United States. It is going to allow the intellectually disingenuous charlatans to define the political landscape for the foreseeable future. That is something we cannot afford. That is why I beseech you to open your eyes, pull your head out of the sand, and take a breath of fresh air and apply the constitutional lens to determine whether or not Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus is qualified to be our candidate for the highest office in the land. That is what our founding fathers would expect of us. That is what they would tell us to do. In fact, that is what they would demand of us. But folks, it falls squarely on our shoulders to do so. Now, as I promised, since the beginning of the show, I'm going to delve into that little juicy piece about Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus supporting another man who thought of himself as Julius Caesar. That man, of course, was Italian fascist dictator of World War II, Benito Mussolini. Benito Mussolini arose into power in Italy during the 1920s. Prior to World War I, he had been a fascist. In fact, his parents had named him after the left-wing leader of Mexico, Benito Juarez. So from the beginning and his education and upbringing, he always had totalitarian leanings that were influenced by Fabian socialist doctrines. In fact, he had been the editor-in-chief of the Italian socialist newspaper Avanti. He then became a fascist, a dictator who wanted to rebirth the glory of Rome, to witness a rekindling of that spirit within Italy. And that is what he attempted to do in World War II. It's why he aligned himself with Adolf Hitler. Now, why is Benito Mussolini so important now? Why is he, after being dead for 70 years, all of a sudden coming to the forefront again? Well, the folks at Gawker created a parody account that was a Mussolini account, which would put up quotes from the fascist Italian dictator in the hopes that Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus would be stupid enough to retweet it. Sure enough, he fell into the trap. He started retweeting it. He hasn't apologized. He hasn't recanted it. He hasn't done anything, just as he hasn't done anything to separate himself from David Duke, former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, who has unofficially endorsed him. You see, folks, this is the problem that surrounds Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus. He represents some of the seediest elements of American society and of society in general. He has a streak of authoritarianism that is the key and the foundation or bedrock of his entire presidential campaign. Folks, this is not stuff that I make up. You can see it for yourself. You can go through his tweets. You can look up the Twitchy article that mentioned this. And that's the thing. Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus has been attacking what is good and decent about the United States of America. It's why he can speak out of both sides of his mouth and yet keep a straight face. But again, I ask you whether that is something that we really want from the person whom we would put up as our nominee for the highest office of the land, that of President of the United States. You see, it doesn't seem to bother people like little orphan Annie Toto, who yep, attacks everybody like a little yapping pest. But that's exactly what she is. She is a little yapping pest. what's more dangerous, what's more nefarious, is the fact that her master, the one that she's following head over heels and doing everything to obfuscate the truth with regards to him, is that he follows the tenets of fascism and socialism, that for the vast majority of his adult life he has professed progressive positions, and even now he's come out and said that he supports the individual mandate of the so-called Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, what is colloquially known as Obamacare. Now he comes out and he says, you see, because I'm against Obamacare, that means that I do have your best interests at heart. But again, nothing could be further from the truth, because what he is offering or proffering to replace it is even worse. You see, folks, when something is unconstitutional, you don't repeal and replace it. You just repeal it. You allow the people to do what is necessary. You allow the free market to drive it. One would think that a business mogul like Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus would innately understand that. Unfortunately, Donaldus Julius Caesar is moving with ulterior motives. He is not who he proclaims to be. He is absolutely a wolf in sheep's clothing. And if you recall the iconography of the Fabian Society of England, their first image, their first symbol was that of a wolf in sheep's clothing. That is what makes Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus so dangerous. It is why he is not qualified to be president of the United States. Why? Because he has embraced unconstitutional positions, and as our first air marshal, Mr. Nelson Ward, has stated on past episodes of the Wright Flyer, anything that is directly contradictory to the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution is absolutely violative of the supreme law of the land as per Article 6, Clause 2. You see, folks, that bears repeating because it is so important. It is something that has gotten no attention from the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media. It has gotten no attention from a vast majority of the detente wing of the gutless opposition party. There is but one candidate left in this presidential race who absolutely stands up for, defends, and promotes the supreme law of the land, and that is none other than Texas Senator Ted Cruz. But you see, we have to overcome all of the nonsense and malarkey spewed by the charlatans and snake oil salesmen, people like little Annie Coulter, Toto, and people like her master and messianic figure, Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus. The reason that we have to cut through what they're saying is they are basing everything that they do, all of their actions, off of raw emotionalism. But folks, I need to remind you that when you are acting off of emotions alone, when you base your entire system of judgment and philosophy off of emotionalism, you are easily duped. You are easily manipulated, and that is exactly what Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus is banking on. There is no way around that. There is no way to sugarcoat that, folks. That is exactly who he is. That is the message that he espouses, and that is why we must be eternally and ever vigilant with respect to it. Because in this election cycle, the most important thing to keep in mind is that our constitutional system of government is on the line. He claims to be a wrecking ball. You know, that is what his own followers say. Allow the wrecking ball of the Trump train to come through and destroy everything. Except I don't want the Constitution destroyed. I don't want what has been the most successful, open, honest, and liberty-loving form of government this world has ever seen to cease to exist. And certainly not for the empty, meaningless, and shallow and hollow platitudes put forth by a charlatan and snake oil salesman. You know, I think it's so interesting that a lot of the trumpeters try to sit there and say that Ted Cruz is just a dirty candidate. What is this? Is this the shampoo department of Donaldus Caesar Trumpus reaching out to them and giving them the talking points? Are the strands and follicles of the great deceiver reaching out and tapping into the collective minds of his followers to create this perception of groupthink? We don't believe in collectivism in the United States. Collectivism goes against the notion of popular sovereignty. Remember that the natural law tenets that underpin this representative republic of ours are absolutely timeless. That means they're just as applicable today as they were 200 years ago, as they will be, God willing, 200 years from now. Again, this is not something that you're going to hear from Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus. Why? Because it goes against his values. A man who has no core beliefs, a man who is consistently inconsistent, is not qualified to be commander-in-chief of these United States of America. That is the stark reality that we must face. The problem is we have all of the spin doctors, all of the charlatans, all of the snake oil salesmen peddling his nonsense and excrement as if it is the honest to God's truth. Yet nothing could be further from the truth. You know, when you have such a vicious, divisive, and poisonous atmosphere in the arena of American politics, it is important that you go back to basics. I know that I have repeated this on past episodes of the Wright Flyer, but I believe that it bears here once again. And that is this: the basics of the United States, the supreme law of the land, is none other than the Constitution. This is why my first officer, Jeremy Grapington, and I oftentimes reiterate the fact that the Constitution is the only litmus test that counts and matters when determining whether a prospective candidate is or is not qualified to be the nominee for our party. But you see, it goes beyond that. Jeremy and I do not just adhere loyalty to a party. We do not espouse loyalty to a political party. We will vote in a political party that most closely resembles our political outlook and philosophy, but that does not mean we are beholden to the party. And you shouldn't be beholden to that political mindset or party either. You know, it is important that we all take responsibility for our own actions and decisions. That is what our founding fathers would call upon us to do, and that is ultimately what I believe in right here and right now. And let me say that Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus does not represent any of our core-held, deeply held political beliefs and values. The thing that all Americans are called upon to swear unwavering loyalty to is the Constitution. And that's something that I take very, very seriously. It is something that I have taken an oath to uphold and defend, and that is exactly why I do this show. I see that this nation is in the midst of an identity crisis that has been perpetuated by the charlatans and the intellectually disingenuous core of Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus's movement. He is a paragon of anger. He is a paragon of divisive speeches. But he is not reflective of the true, noble heritage, character, and spirit of the United States of America. That is the spirit of the Constitution that he attacks. That is the intelligence and intellectual capacity of the true popular sovereigns, we the people of the United States, that he goes against. At every given and available opportunity, he belittles us and besmirches us. That is not the sort of characteristics that I expect from a person who is vying for the highest office in the land. I think it utterly and completely disqualifies him from ever wielding the reins of political power in this great representative republic of ours. But it is not just my words that I want you to go on here, folks. I want you to research this for yourselves. I want you to draw your own conclusions. I want you to empower yourself with this knowledge so that you can say the most powerfully, universally understood word of the English language. It's a two-letter word, and it has such a biting presence. No. No, we will not hand over the reins of political power to a charlatan who is being intellectually disingenuous. We will not hand over the reins of political power to a fascist and a deviant like Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus. We will stand steadfast for the representative republic that we are and the natural law tenets that underpins the very foundation of this great government of ours. That is what we as American citizens must do. For if we fail to do so, then we are handing over the reins of power to those who are hell-bent on destroying everything that is decent and good about the United States of America. Is that really what we want to do? Is that really what we're going to allow happen to this great nation of ours? If so, we are completely derelict in our duties, obligations, and responsibilities as popular sovereigns. And I certainly hope that that is not the case for this country, because we have been the most stable, the most honest, the most open, the most liberty-loving society that this world has ever seen. We cannot afford to allow these frauds and these charlatans to deprive us of everything that defines who we are as a people. And believe me, folks, that is found within the four corners of our shared Constitution. It is important that we all recall that the Constitution of the United States of America belongs to we the people. It doesn't belong to the candidates except in their capacity as American citizens. And no, Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus, the Constitution and the American people and our sacred values are not up for sale, and they are by no means negotiable. You may claim to be a great negotiator. That's fine. But I don't want a negotiator as president. I want someone who will strictly adhere to the fundamental tenets contained within our Constitution. That is what he is duty obliged to call upon. When you look within the confines of Article 2, which directly defines the scope and power of the chief executive, that of President of the United States, it clearly states that he shall faithfully execute the laws of the land. But that is not what we have seen for far too long now in this country. We have seen those who are hell-bent on destroying this country get more and more power at the expense of the ultimate wielders of sovereignty in this country, we the people. These are the undeniable facts, folks. We speak just the facts here on the Wright Flyer. We want you to be empowered. We want you to be able to take whatever steps are necessary to turn this country around. But in order to do that, we must also coalesce behind a true constitutional conservative whose principles have been unwavering and steadfast, a stalwart and staunch defender of everything that we hold near and dear in this republic of ours. And so far, there is only one candidate who exudes that, who has exuded that for the entirety of his career. And that is none other than Texas Senator Ted Cruz. You see, folks, I speak of this because it is so important, because we are at the precipice of destruction and ruination in this country. We can ill afford to allow an unelectable candidate like Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus to be our nominee, because if he is, that will guarantee that Madam Clinton, who is fast approaching the requirements to be the Democrat Fabian Socialist Party's nominee, the reins of power, it will hand it over to her, because Trump cannot defeat her. Why? Trump is but an opposite gender reflection of the same policies and positions that she has held. He is absolutely contrary to everything that our founding fathers stood for and represented. You know, the annals of history hold great lessons for us. Our founding fathers said Particularly with the words of Benjamin Franklin, "We have handed you a republic if you can keep it." You see, what he meant by that is that we are duty bound as American citizens to stand up for and defend our fundamental and unalienable rights, that we are duty bound to protect this great representative Republican form of government that is the freest, most honest, and most open type of society that could be had. And here we are, some 230 plus years after the birth of this great nation of ours, facing down its entire and total destruction. And if we are not careful, the charlatans, the snake oil salesmen, those who would retweet the words of fascist dictator Benito Mussolini and have no problems being associated with him, are about to tear our country apart, and we are falling for it. It is time for America to wake up. It is time for us to become proactive in the maintenance and safeguarding of our fundamental and unalienable rights that were endowed to us by the God of nature. I don't say this for fear-mongering purposes. I don't say this to purposefully startle you. I am just telling you the stark reality that faces us as a nation and as a people. And if we do not wake up, and if we do not realize this, it will be a major catastrophe and calamity for this nation. And that is the thing that we have to do. We have to be proactive. We have to maintain our standards, because if we don't, there is a lot that could go awry. And what I mean by that is that our nation is on the brink of ruin. And in a way, we have allowed it to reach this point. But that does not mean that we cannot turn around. And that is something that must be done. And just stop and think about how important this is for us. It's because if we fail, it means that the up-and-coming generations and those generations yet to be born will not have the same opportunities that we have. It's just that fact. And the reason I say that we have to have this fact in place, it's because our country matters that much, and we are duty bound to hand this down to the up-and-coming generations and the generations yet to be born. And I can't stress just how important that is, because when you turn and look at the stakes that are involved, it is too great, it is too powerful, it is too consuming. We must coalesce together and stand up for what is right and decent about this country. Because if we fail to do that, our country is not something that should just be allowed to fall apart. Because when we do that, it tears apart the contract that has been binding to all of us for such a long time now. Folks, history demands that we be proactive, that we take the steps that are necessary to defend this country. And in order to do that, our best bet to do that means that we have to coalesce behind a candidate that is a principled conservative and has been for all of his life. And that is Texas Senator Ted Cruz. That is what we are called to do. And with that said, it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to go ahead and send the flight attendant back for one last round of alcohol. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, I am your captain, Randy Wright, and I want to take this opportunity to thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. And I also invite you to leave any questions, comments, or concerns, or whatever, either here on our YouTube page, or on our Google Plus page, or on our Facebook page. And I also invite you to follow us at Twitter with the Twitter handle of @RadioAviationX. Folks, that's all one word, @RadioAviationEX, @RadioAviationEX. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. We will see you next time. Do take care.